Number 10. The Grand Inquisitor. This alternate version of Magneto comes to us from the reality of Earth 311, the 1602 reality. Here Magneto is known as ENRIQUE, or by his title as the Grand Inquisitor. It is his job to hunt down and kill any witch breed that he finds. Witch breed in this reality is the name used for mutants. The Grand Inquisitor does as is expected, but secretly saves the witch breed who can pass off as human, only killing those who are very obviously mutated. More often those who have physical mutations which they cannot hide. Due to his clout and title, the Grand Inquisitor is a dangerous character who also holds a lot of power. Number 9. Earth 1. Did you know that there is also a one-off Aquaman villain from Earth 1 named Magneto? True story. This version of the character, who shares the same name with the Marvel villain and anti-hero, was a villainous robot who appeared in Aquaman issue 36 in 1967. DC's villainous robotic Magneto also had the power of magnetism, which allows them to manipulate and control their colleague, the Claw. Together, Torpedo Man, Claw, and Magneto made up the villainous team known as the Awesome Three. While the Awesome Three were ultimately defeated, making this version of Magneto sound pretty tame, Aquaman did remark that he really wouldn't want to tangle with their ilk or their weird alien pal again in the future. And he got his wish, because I'm pretty sure they never really reappeared ever again, despite promising to do so. Also, I feel like the team name Awesome 3 definitely makes them sound not like a villainous team. Awesome 3. Number 8. Mutant X. In this reality, Magneto is actually a hero who is good friends with Charles Xavier, and worked together with him, but was forced to turn against his friend after a fight with Shadow King left him changed. During the fight, Charles had absorbed the evil essence of Shadow King, which later caused him to accidentally kill Moira McTaggart, whom Magneto was in love with. Magneto was unable to forgive his friend and decided to rule the X-Men alone, creating a divide in the team. His roster included Polaris, Quicksilver, Nightcrawler, Rogue, and Mystique. In the Mutant X reality of Earth 1298, Magneto would be one of the last heroes left standing and fighting on. Number 7. Earth Z. In the Marvel Zombies reality, Magneto is a proper badass who ends up managing to fight on against the zombies for quite some time. He also has multiple opportunities to leave and save himself, but proves to be a real hero who would rather ensure or avoid risking the safety of many in exchange for putting himself in peril. And it is because of this that he eventually is taken down, bitten, and transformed. Zombie Magneto. Before that, however, he helped to save the Ultimate Universe and chose to refuse help from the Acolytes in order to ensure their safety as survivors. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about Magneto, the Master of Magnetism, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 6. Earth X. Magneto in this reality at a time was very powerful, but then also went the other way later on. Here Magneto was a savior for mutants who fought off the Sentinels. At this time, Sentinels were activated in order to round up all mutants, including burgeoning ones created unknowingly by Terrigen Mists, which had been released into Earth's atmosphere. Magneto tricked the Sentinels into pursuing him into the Savage Land, whose climate had actually iron-rich air, which Magneto was able to use to defeat the Sentinels, making a safe haven for all mutated folks, new and old, called Sentinel City. However, while this shows how powerful this version of Magneto could be, for a time he had his powers swapped with Toad, though later this was resolved and Magneto would get his powers back. Number 5. Eric Magnus. What if Magneto could build his own metal robot army? That's kind of what this character is about. Eric Magnus is the Amalgam Universe version of Magneto. He possesses a genius level intellect and the powers of 616 Magneto, being a sort of combined version of DC's Doc Magnus and Marvel's Magneto. In this reality, however, Eric had a brother named Will. While Eric's abilities would manifest in his teens and inspire him to create his own group known as the Brotherhood of Mutants, his brother Will, now terrified of Eric, would use his smarts to create Sentinels, which would go on to destroy Magneto's team, with him being the lone survivor. In retaliation, Magneto would create his own robots to combat his brothers, known as the Uncanny Magnetic Men, whose sole purpose was to protect mutants and destroy the Sentinels. Number 4. Ultimate. Although he was ultimately defeated by Revelation and Logic, as well as a powerful optic blast from Cyclops, Magneto here accomplished a lot of awful stuff before he was apprehended. In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, Magneto was a villain due to his hatred of the human race and his desire to dominate and rule over them. He believed basically that Homo superior are just that, superior, and should rule over humankind, the Homo sapiens of Earth. He was the driving force behind Ultimatum, which caused so much death, including the deaths of pretty much almost all of the X-Men. However, in the end he was stopped when he learned that mutants weren't really the next step in evolution, but simply happened as the result of years of experimentation with the super soldier serum, which among other things also created mutants. Learning that his whole philosophy was built on a lie pretty much destroyed Magneto, giving Cyclops the opportunity to take him out. Number 3. Age of Apocalypse. In the reality of Earth 295, Magneto becomes the leader of the X-Men after Charles Xavier dies at the hands of Legion before he was able to ever form the team. Magneto here is the one responsible for defeating Apocalypse, and while he didn't save everyone in his final stand against Apocalypse, he was celebrated as a hero by all of humanity who thought what was actually the work of a near-dead Phoenix Force empowered Jean Grey was actually Magneto's doing. So not only is he immensely powerful here as a leader and a mutant, but he's also celebrated as a hero by the people, enhancing his influence even more. Number 2. Onslaught. Onslaught is definitely one of the most powerful Magneto alternates out there. Technically, this version of Magneto does hail from the main continuity, but he is also both Magneto and not Magneto, which is what makes him an alternate basically. Onslaught is made up of the combined consciousness of both Magneto and Professor X, so if you ever wondered what would happen if you put these two together, the answer is something immensely terrifying that threatens the existence of all heroes across the universe, aka Onslaught. Number 1. Brother Mutant. Brother Mutant is a version of Magneto that came about after the female alternate Magneto from Earth 127 attempted to take Wolverine's adamantium for herself. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately depending on how you want to look at it, her plan failed, resulting in the combined superpowered beings becoming something new. Brother Mutant is a being made out of Wolverine, Magneto, Scarlet Warlock, Quicksilver, and Mesmero combined. This alternate version of the characters therefore possess all their collective abilities, making them pretty OP. Number 10. Chief Magnus. In the Noiroverse, the reality of Earth 90214, Eric Magnus is one of the worst kind of villains, and he doesn't even have any powers here. Much like how Spider-Man has a noir version of that comic, so does the X-Men. In the comic series X-Men Noir, we meet Chief of the NYPD Detectives, Eric Magnus, a crooked cop who aims to protect his family through using his power to control the criminal world, creating his own underworld society known as the Brotherhood. He attempts to encourage Charles Xavier to partner with him. Xavier runs a school for wayward youth, and Magnus would see them given a place in the criminal world via the Brotherhood. When Charles refuses, Magnus has one of his students killed. Number 9. Grand Inquisitor ENRIQUE. Obviously, we have to talk about the dark alternate reality that is Neil Gaiman's 1602. Here, Magneto is known as ENRIQUE, who was a young Jewish boy in Venice who was separated from his family and baptized by a priest and raised by the Catholic Church, forbidden from ever returning to his family again. He would go on to become the Grand Inquisitor, responsible for searching out, hunting down, and eliminating the witch breed, which in 1602 speak is another word for mutant. ENRIQUE was forced to burn alive witch breed with visible mutations at the stake, despite being one himself, and really wanting to not do that. Number 8. Earth X. On the alternate reality of Earth 9997, which comes to us from the Earth X series, Magneto ends up as Toad's slave after being originally proclaimed a hero. In this reality, Magneto defeats all the Sentinels and rules in the newly formed Sentinel City thereafter. He invites Toad to join him, but Toad secretly resents Magneto for all the years of mistreatment he has suffered while under his leadership. When the vibranium levels in the Earth change, however, Magneto finds his powers have altered. In fact, Toad seems to have inherited his powerful magnetic abilities somehow due to this change, and Magneto is left depowered. Toad then enslaves Magneto for a time, and Magneto is forced to become Toad's jester. Both funny and dark. It's funny dark. Dark humor. Number 7. The Chaos Engine Trilogy. The Chaos Engine Trilogy is an X-Men novel that is a collection of 3 stories which explore alternate realities where 3 iconic Marvel villains use the Cosmic Cube in order to manipulate the world, finalizing their plans for world domination and shaping the world in their own image. Magneto himself is one of those iconic villains and is featured in the second book. The X-Men must fight to stop Magneto from enacting a plan which would result in worldwide mass murder, allowing Magneto to finally assert his dominance over the humans who have long toiled to oppress mutant kind. Of course, this is the sort of thing Magneto is usually plotting as a villain, but this time around he has the power of the Cosmic Cube to back him up, making this version of him even more frightening. Number 6. Age of Apocalypse. While the alternate version of Magneto in AOA got a few nice moments in this reality, he also had some pretty dark ones. In AOA, Magneto leads the X-Men, as Charles Xavier is killed when he sacrifices himself to protect Eric. Magneto and his X-Men are forced to face Apocalypse, who rules as a powerful tyrant, eliminating the weak and experimenting on others to create the strongest version of mutant. Magneto loses both of his children, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, in battle in this reality, and also ends up locking himself up in prison after Apocalypse is defeated due to it being revealed that he withheld information from the rest of the X-Men and the new mutant branch of government. However, this is also the reality where he finds love with fellow mutant Rogue. The two of them even have a child together. In the end, however, both he and Rogue are brutally murdered by the AOA version of Logan, Weapon X, who later betrays the X-Men by becoming the new Apocalypse. Number 5. Big Town. During a Fantastic Four What If miniseries entitled Big Town, Magneto appears as one of the villains teamed up to take down enemy Reed Richards. The crazy thing about this story and this alternate Magneto of Earth 110 is that he doesn't attempt to take out Mr. Fantastic alone. He is joined by Hulk, Namor, Doctor Doom, Ultron, of course his own Brotherhood of Mutants, which this time around includes Storm and Wolverine surprisingly, and Red Skull. Yep, Magneto has been established as a Holocaust survivor, which granted could not be true in this alternate reality, we don't fully know, but we can likely assume that he is, as it's not singled out as being a difference. Alternate reality stories tend to enjoy flaunting any differences, as that's, kind of what they're all about. So yeah, Magneto, a Jewish World War II survivor, a Holocaust survivor, and Red Skull, an established German World War II soldier, team up to take out Reed Richards in this story, which is admittedly pretty dark, because that's not a thing you'd think Magneto would do normally. Number 4. X-Sentinels. One of the stories in X-Men Millennial Visions tells us of how over time, as the X-Men and other mutants like Magneto aged, they slowly transitioned to become cyborgs, until they were just full-on robots, with their consciousness just downloaded into their cyber bodies. As time went on, their mental faculties began to break down due to the overload of information over time, basically causing their brains to kind of short circuit. All they could remember clearly was their mission to protect mutant kind. Clinging on to this last principle, the cyborg mutants become X-Sentinels, who instead of hunting down mutants, would hunt down and exterminate humans. So in a way, they became their own worst enemy. Number 3. X-Men films. What we know of Eric's past in the X-Men films is enough to convince you just how dark of a character and story he saw there. Eric was Jewish and living in Germany with his family during World War II. As a young boy, his powers started to manifest, but not strong or soon enough to save his family from being put into concentration camps. He was studied by a doctor who was allied with the Germans, a man we'd come to know as the famous Sebastian Shaw. And when Eric could not perform one of the tests that Shaw gave him, Shaw murdered his mother in front of him, hoping that the rage would help to unlock the full potential of Eric's powers. This is also the reality where much later on Eric would settle down and start a family. Eric was married and he and his wife had a daughter together, following his adventures in the film Days of Future Past. Unfortunately, after coworkers discovered that Eric is actually Magneto, witnessing his powers, he ends up being apprehended by the Polish authorities, who accidentally kill his family when his daughter's mutant powers begin to manifest. Yikes. Poor Magneto. Number 2. Days of Future Past, but the comic book version. Magneto from the alternate reality of Earth 811 has a pretty bleak life after the Sentinels take over the country. At first free from the mutant concentration camps, Magneto is aiming to find his daughter Scarlet Witch, who has gone missing. When Wolverine, Jubilee, and Magneto do find her, they discover she's being held prisoner and used as a weapon by the Hellfire Club. They free her, but she ends up dying anyways, and during the fight, the bones in Magneto's legs are completely shattered, leaving him unable to walk. When finally captured by the Sentinels and placed in a mutant concentration camp, which you think would be hard enough for the poor man, he ends up sacrificing his life to help the X-Men and Franklin Richards escape so they can hopefully follow through with their plan to alter reality and avoid this whole apocalyptic fate. Number 1. Ultimate Magneto. Magneto in the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610 is the most extreme and the most dark, like many other Ultimate versions. This is the reality where both Magneto and Xavier, when they first meet, decide that mutant kind is meant to replace humankind and form the Brotherhood. Here, a young Eric also kills his father when his powers first manifest, though in his defense, his father was trying to shoot him dead at the time. Eric instinctively causes the bullet to turn back around on his father, fatally wounding him with the reversed gunshot. This is also the reality where when some refused to join Magneto in his cause, he simply responded by killing them. During Ultimatum, his severe stance on how to best deal with the oppression of mutant kind caused him to kill millions of people, including his former friend Xavier. He snapped Xavier's neck and also killed other famous X-Men including Beast and Nightcrawler.
Coming in at number 10, Magneto Earth 691. We get our first viewing of Magneto Earth 691 in the comic book Guardians of the Galaxy number 9, seen here. Now, Magneto was leading a pretty normal mutant life, as normal as you can, on Earth until the government decided to release the Sentinels on all mutant kind. A Sentinel is basically a bunch of mutant hunting robots. Magneto has always had a soft spot for keeping his kind safe, and as a result of this new attack, he takes as many of them that are left into a spaceship to escape. And once they escape, they land on a moon of Saturn, and who knew that was a safe place? He was then forced by a challenge of his authority to send all of the remaining mutants back into space just to escape. Coming in at number 9, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. In the X-Men comic What If Volume 2, number 13, we find Magneto in charge of a Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, who soon changed their name to just Brotherhood of Mutants. Very smart PR move if you ask me. Why tell people you're evil if you can just show them? The original team consisted of Toad, no, not that Toad, the Blob, Beast, and Angel, along with Nightcrawler and the Iceman Bobby Drake, who unfortunately doesn't really last that long in this series. This version of Magneto is seen again in X-Men Blue when an admittedly older Magneto decides that his only way to ensure the mutant race lives on is to bring back the Brotherhood to seek destruction against those who oppose mutants being equal to humans. Number 8. Magneto Earth 2159. In this version of Magneto, he's still kind of leading the resistance against the X-Men, but only after his team was founded when Apocalypse murdered his best friend, Charles Xavier. Magneto was rocking a kind of cool Silver Surfer look, and in this version, he looks pretty dope doing it. Number 7, President of the United States. Now, if you thought a reality TV show star with being president was crazy, I got news for you. Yeah, that's right. There's a version of Magneto who was sworn in as the US president. Now, it wasn't the type of mutant takeover that you would expect. It was actually quite diplomatic. After becoming the Senator of Washington, Magneto set forth bigger plans. 2 things you should know. Number 1, he entered as a Republican, and he had a very high approval rating because, well, he was the first mutant to run for office. Although not everyone was on his side. A ton of anti-mutant groups formed, opposing his messages, and even set fire to his lawn as a message. Although he quickly put that out by just covering his lawn with metal. Who needs a lawn anyways? Number 6, the Secret Empire. In this reality, it shows a Magneto that turns over his values and beliefs that were built out of being a survivor of the Nazi Holocaust. He used violence at any cost to keep his people safe. But in the Secret Empire storyline, he's faced with a new decision. A newly evil Captain America asks Magneto to ignore the fact that Hydra has a new influence over the United States. In return of looking away and just turning a blind eye from this fascist regime, he's awarded with a massive land to keep as a safe haven for mutants. I mean, it's kind of disappointing because we're not used to a Magneto just giving up like that, especially when Hydra is on a dark path of repeating Nazis' history. Number 5, follow the leader. In the New Mutants Volume 1, number 49, Magneto has risen to lead the mutants in collaboration with the Hellfire Club, all hell-bent on fighting humans who oppose the mutants. However, they take it to extreme lengths by just tormenting them, and even referring to Homo sapiens as subs, meaning subhuman. That's crazy. Subhuman? Number 4, wheelchair Magneto. Remember those Sentinels from before, well, they're back and in charge of North America. We find a Magneto, however, in a wheelchair, and like his compatriots, he's being held in a mutant concentration camp. In this issue of Days of Future Past, Magneto's powers are of no use because of an inhibitor collar that he has around his neck. Even with the loss of his powers though, it's believed that he devises a plan for the mutants to escape and send Kate Pryde's spirit back through time. As if escaping a prison wouldn't be difficult enough, this guy just doesn't quit. Even after Franklin Richards is able to disable all of the inhibitors and release the mutants from the camp, Magneto stays behind to make sure that they get out safe. I smell a Nobel Peace Prize if you ask me. Number 3, Magneto Earth 9796. In this timeline, the villain Juggernaut has killed the X-Men and without realizing doomed the fate of humanity. Being that there wasn't any X-Men on Earth to stop future evils, the Sentinels were built in mass to defeat any remaining mutants with just a single strike. Magneto sees what's happening and makes his return to Earth from the Stranger's planet, but it's far too late. When he arrives, he held Juggernaut responsible for everything. Even after escaping back to the Stranger's planet, where he has created this utopia for the remaining mutants and humans to live together, Juggernaut still finds a way to find the secret community and, much like before, doom them all. Number 2, JFK assassination. Now, I've always been into the conspiracies surrounding the JFK assassination. That's why this Magneto storyline in the Days of Future Past is especially interesting. JFK was seen as a voice for civil rights of all Americans. So in this universe, it's clear to see that mutants would fall into that category as well. Magneto was seen as a terrorist though by the US, but in a strange twist of fate, he was actually trying to use his abilities to sway the bullet in question that assassinated the president. Although unfortunately, he missed his target when the Secret Service agents just tackled him to the ground. Last but not least, the Savior. Professor X and Magneto have definitely had their differences. However, when Charles Xavier becomes the victim of an alien plague that paralyzes his body completely, Magneto, also known as Magnus in this universe, joins forces with Charles to overtake Baron Strucker, the source for all of their problems. Magneto overpowers Baron by using his powers to manipulate magnetic fields, turning Baron's metal claw into this big red fiery mess, thus saving Professor X.
Number 10, leader of the X-Men. On Earth 8013, Professor X was killed by Lucifer rather than becoming paralyzed, leading Magneto to form the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants with some of the original X-Men. His team included Cyclops, Iceman, and Beast, as well as Archangel, Psyche, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver. Magneto managed to conquer Earth with his team, defeating the Avengers, Fantastic Four, and Doctor Doom. Unfortunately, since Ben Grimm died at the hands of the Brotherhood, he wasn't there to turn Silver Surfer to humanity's side, and the Earth was consumed by Galactus. Pretty neat storyline, but definitely not one I'd like to be part of. Number 9, X-Men Magneto. The Magneto of Earth 27, first seen in Exiles number 1, had similar beginnings to our own, fighting against humanity and what he saw as the protection of mutants. In this reality, however, he later changed his mind and joined up with the X-Men. Hey, good guy Magneto. He ended up having a kid with Rogue named Magnus, who had a sort of combination of his parents' powers. He would turn everything he touched into metal. This was obviously super inconvenient, and he later was taken to join the Exiles, went on to die on his first mission, crushing Magneto when he found out. As much as I love Magneto as a villain, it's really enjoyable to see him actually living well and having a family, albeit an unconventional one. Number 8, Jester Magneto. This one's pretty satisfying. In the Earth X storyline, Terrigen mists were released that caused a large portion of the population to mutate. As an eventual result of this, not directly, but it's too complicated to discuss right now, the poles of the Earth shifted. For some reason, this caused Magneto and Toad to switch powers. Now it was Toad who had magnetic powers, and he used his newfound strength to turn Magneto into a slave, dancing around for his pleasure. Magneto's time without his normal powers was relatively short-lived, but as much as I love Magneto, it was satisfying to see him knock down a peg. Number 7, Age of Apocalypse Magneto. The Magneto of Earth 295 led a pretty crazy life. It started in a familiar way with him making friends with Charles Xavier, but when Xavier's future son comes to try to kill Eric, he failed hard, both destabilizing all of existence with his time travel and failing to kill Magneto when Xavier gives his life to save him. Magneto ended up starting the X-Men himself, fighting against Apocalypse with his team. He was even tortured by Apocalypse for some time and refused to turn in his allies, and later became the director of mutant affairs. Magneto kept busy in this storyline, and he didn't really like it, but I did. I thought it was swell. Number 6, Eagle Magneto. In X-Men Fairy Tales number 2, Magneto and Professor X starred in their version of the African story, The Friendship of the Tortoise and the Eagle. Magneto, the Eagle, saw his family family being killed as a youngster. This forced him to fight and learn by himself in order to survive. The upbringing of the tortoise was not so terrible, but he did face isolation due to a large X on his back. While these two took very different things from their experiences and have very different attitudes, they strike up quite a nice friendship. I won't get into the whole story because it would take a little while, but I definitely suggest giving it a read. While it's an old tale, it's incredibly relevant to Magneto and Professor X and gives you a new perspective on the characters. Number 5. House of M Magneto. This Magneto of Earth 58-163 started out in similar ways in a concentration camp. Seeing the terrible treatment of mutants as he grew up, Magneto began fighting against his human oppressors, later declaring that he would bring the fight wherever mutants were being oppressed. He eventually became friends with Charles Xavier after Charles saved his life, and together the two take to liberating the nation of Genosha, where mutants were treated as slaves. Magneto then took control of the nation, turning it into a sanctuary for mutants, later becoming the greatest superpower in the world. This is one version of Magneto that's pretty well known, but it's a damn cool story. Number 4. Magneto 1602. Marvel 1602, we meet again. This time talking about Magneto, or ENRIQUE. In the 1602 series, mutants were called witch breeds and were hunted in the Spanish Inquisition. And guess who was the Grand Inquisitor? Yep, good old Magneto. Even though he was a mutant himself, he led the Inquisition, killing those with visible mutations while recruiting those with more subtle mutations to his Brotherhood. He eventually was found out and ended up teaming up with Professor X's version, Javier, aiding the out-of-his-time Captain America, here named Rojas, back to his own time. Gotta love 1602. Number 3. Demon Magneto. Here's another one from X-Men Fairy Tales, this time from issue number 1. In this story, based on the Japanese tale of the Little Peach Boy, Magneto and his children are evil demons who overrun a town. Peach Boy, a young Cyclops, so-called because he stops his I-beam using a peach pit, goes on a quest to defeat the demons. He manages to succeed with the help of fairy tale versions of Professor X, Beast, Angel, and Iceman. But the real highlight of this story for me was frickin' Magneto, because he looked so damn cool. Long silver hair, large horns, and the fact that he's stupidly jacked make him a pretty intimidating sight. Number 2. Not a zombie Magneto. I know it sounds weird to call out a version of Magneto because he isn't a zombie, but bear with me. In Marvel Zombies, Magneto is one of the few metahumans who isn't turned into a zombie, and actually plays a super heroic role. He saves and defends non-infected humans, taking them into his secret hideout for safety, and even sacrifices himself in the end to help his new allies escape. He's eventually bitten by a zombie wasp, but not before totally redeeming himself and saving countless lives. Pretty funny that in a world where the greatest heroes are evil zombies, one of the greatest villains basically becomes Harriet Tubman. Number 1. Age of X Magneto. Age of X Magneto is pretty sick. I can tell you about his work with resistance movements, his creation of the Brotherhood and the Acolytes, his support for the Mutant Liberation Front. I could talk about how he tried to reverse the Earth's poles, launched attacks against powerful governments, and even stole whole skyscrapers to take to Fortress X. But I won't, because the reason he's on this list is that he looks so damn sick. Look at that. He's like the coolest White Knight ever, rocking the white-haired Flo with the sick armor and cape. He's just so cool looking. Yeah, that's all. He's cool.